The courtroom was silent except for the hum of translation devices. Tae-sung stood in the center of a massive circular chamber, his hands bound by energy cuffs that glowed blue against his skin. Above him, 7 massive screens displayed the faces of the Galactic Council members. Each belonged to a different alien species, each more advanced than humanity, and each looking at him with what he could only describe as disgust. Tae-sung kept his face calm, but inside his heart pounded. He was innocent. He knew he was innocent. But the evidence against him was damning, and these aliens had already made up their minds. The lead prosecutor, Vikralis, moved forward on 6 legs. His body resembled a massive insect, covered in dark chitinous armor that reflected the blue light of the chamber. His eyes were crystalline and multifaceted, showing no emotion that Tae-sung could recognize. When Vikralis spoke, the words came through the translator implant in Tae-sung's ear. Human Tae-sung, you stand accused of sabotaging the Meridian power relay. This act resulted in power failures across 3 inhabited worlds. 47 individuals died when life support systems failed. Thousands more suffered. Do you understand the severity of these charges? Tae-sung's jaw tightened. I understand the charges, but I didn't do it. I've told you this repeatedly. I was nowhere near that relay when it was sabotaged. One of the council members, a floating jellyfish-like creature named Aurea, pulsed with red light. Her voice was soft but cold. Your genetic material was found at the scene. Security footage shows a figure matching your physical description. Your work schedule placed you in that sector. The evidence is conclusive. The evidence is planted, Tae-sung said, keeping his voice steady. Someone framed me. I'm an engineer. I know how those systems work. If I wanted to sabotage that relay, I would have done it in a way that couldn't be traced back to me. Vikralis clicked his mandibles together, a sound the translator rendered as laughter. Ah yes, the human claims he would have committed the perfect crime. This only proves your guilt further. Your species is known for its violent tendencies and emotional instability. You are primitives who barely achieved space travel a century ago. The Council should never have allowed humans into our stations. The word stung, but Tae-sung forced himself to stay calm. Getting angry would only confirm their biases. I request a proper investigation. Give me time to prove my innocence. Check the relay's security systems more carefully. Someone with advanced knowledge of your technology would know how to fake that evidence. Another council member spoke. A reptilian creature with scales that shimmered like oil. The investigation is complete. We have reviewed all evidence. The verdict has been decided. Tae-sung's stomach dropped. You can't be serious. You're not even going to give me a chance to defend myself properly. Vikralis moved closer, his massive form towering over Tae-sung. You had your chance. The evidence speaks clearly. However, there is discussion among the council about your punishment. Some believe you should be executed immediately. Others believe such an act would create diplomatic problems with your primitive homeworld. We are not primitive, Tae-sung said through gritted teeth. And executing an innocent person should be what creates diplomatic problems. Silence, Vikralis commanded. The council has reached a compromise. We will not execute you. Instead, you will be banished to planet Karos 9, located in the Crimson Void. You will be provided with basic supplies and an escape pod. What happens after that will be between you and fate. The name Karos 9 sent a chill down Tae-sung's spine. He had heard stories about that place. Every spacer in the galaxy had. It was a death world, a planet so hostile that even the most advanced species avoided it. But worse than the planet itself was what lived there. The Devourer, Tae-sung whispered. Vikralis's mandibles clicked again. Ah, so you have heard the legends. Yes, the Devourer makes Karos 9 its hunting ground. It has destroyed 17 exploration vessels over the past 2 centuries. No one who lands on that planet survives. Consider this a mercy, human. Your death will be quick and your homeworld cannot accuse us of murder. You simply disappeared in an unfortunate accident. Tae-sung looked up at the council members on their screens. He saw no sympathy in any of their alien faces. They had already decided he was guilty, and this was a convenient way to eliminate him without political consequences. This is murder, he said quietly. You know I won't survive there. That is the point, Aurea said, her body pulsing with satisfied colors. You are a threat to galactic peace. This sentence protects billions of lives. 2 security drones floated down from the ceiling, their weapon ports glowing. Tae-sung didn't resist as they escorted him out of the courtroom. There was no point. He had no allies here, no way to fight back. The only other humans on the station were civilians who had no power to help him. The drones took him to a launch bay where a small escape pod waited. It was barely 3 meters long, a simple cylinder designed for emergency evacuations. Inside, Tae-sung found 3 containers of water, several packets of nutrient paste, a basic survival knife, and a communicator with a cracked screen that flickered uselessly. "Your supplies," one of the drones announced in a flat electronic voice. "You have 3 days of water and 5 days of food. The knife is for basic survival tasks. The communicator is non-functional but included per council regulations." Tae-sung climbed into the pod, his mind racing. 3 days of water, 5 days of food, a broken communicator. They really were sending him to die. The pod door sealed with a hiss. Through the small viewport, Tae-sung watched as the launch bay doors opened, revealing the blackness of space. Red emergency lights bathed the interior of the pod, casting everything in a bloody glow. "Initiating launch sequence," the computer announced. "Destination, Karos 9, Crimson Void Sector. Travel time 6 hours. Prepare for acceleration." The pod lurched forward, pressing Tae-sung back into the uncomfortable seat. Within seconds, the massive alien station disappeared from view, replaced by the infinite darkness of space. Ahead, barely visible, was a small red star. Karos 9 orbited that dying sun, a world where no one returned from. Tae-sung closed his eyes and took a deep breath. His military training kicked in, pushing away the panic and fear. First rule of survival, don't give up. Second rule, assess your resources. Third rule, make a plan. He had 3 days of water, 5 days of food, a knife, and his own skills. He had survived combat situations before, lived in hostile environments during his special forces training. This was different, he knew. This was worse. But he was still alive, and as long as he was alive, he had a chance. The pod shook as it entered Karos 9's atmosphere. Through the viewport, Tae-sung saw the planet's surface for the first time. Volcanic plains stretched as far as he could see. Rivers of molten rock glowing orange against black obsidian mountains. The sky was the color of dried blood, thick with toxic clouds. "Landing in 30 seconds, the computer announced. "Impact will be significant. Brace for collision." Tae-sung gripped the harness straps and prepared himself. The pod struck the ground with tremendous force, bouncing twice before sliding across the volcanic rock. Alarms blared as the viewport cracked, the interior filled with acrid smoke. When everything finally stopped moving, Tae-sung sat in the darkness, breathing hard. He was alive. Against all odds, against the council's wishes, he was alive. He released the harness and kicked open the damaged door. Hot sulfurous air rushed in, burning his throat. Tae-sung pulled his emergency breather over his face and stepped out onto the surface of Karos 9. The death world stretched before him, hostile and unforgiving. Somewhere in this nightmare landscape, the devourer waited. The aliens expected him to die here. They were wrong. The heat was unbearable. Even with the emergency breather filtering the toxic air, Tae-sung felt like his lungs were on fire. The volcanic plains of Karos 9 radiated waves of heat that made the horizon shimmer and dance. Sweat poured down his face within minutes of leaving the crashed pod. He forced himself to think clearly. First priority, find shelter. Second, secure water. Third, survive long enough to figure out what came next. The crashed pod was useless now. Its systems were dead, the hull cracked open like an egg. Tae-sung salvaged what he could. The water containers, food packets, the knife, the broken communicator, and some metal panels that might be useful later. He fashioned a crude backpack from the pod's emergency supply bag and loaded everything into it. Looking around, Tae-sung spotted a ridge of obsidian mountains about 2 kilometers away. Mountains meant caves, and caves meant shelter from the brutal temperature swings he knew would come. The research he had read about Death World suggested that volcanic planets like this one experienced freezing nights and scorching days. The walk to the mountains was hell. The ground was sharp volcanic rock that cut through the soles of his boots. Rivers of molten lava forced him to take long detours. Twice the ground shook with tremors that nearly knocked him off his feet. By the time he reached the base of the mountains, his legs were shaking with exhaustion. But he found what he needed: a cave system carved into the obsidian rock. The entrance was narrow, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through, but inside it opened into a larger chamber. The temperature was cooler here, though still uncomfortably warm. Best of all, it was defensible. Tae-sung spent the first hour exploring the cave. It went deeper than he expected, tunneling into the mountain. In some of the deeper chambers, he found crystalline formations growing from the walls, giving off a faint blue glow. He also found water, dripping from the ceiling and collecting in small pools. He tested it carefully with a scrap of cloth. The fabric didn't dissolve or change color. It might be safe to drink. Using his knife and the metal panels from the pod, he set up a basic camp near the entrance. He arranged rocks to create a barrier that could be defended if necessary. He rationed his food carefully, calculating that if he was very careful, he could make it last 10 days instead of 5. That first night, the temperature dropped so fast that ice formed on the cave walls. Tae-sung huddled in his thermal blanket, shivering despite the insulation. He understood now why this place was called a death world. Everything here was designed to kill anything that didn't belong. On the second day, he explored further from the cave, marking his path with scratches on the rocks. He needed to understand this environment if he was going to survive. He found more caves, more lava flows, and something that made his blood run cold. Enormous claw marks carved deep into solid rock. Each groove was 3 meters deep and as wide as his arm. Whatever made these marks was massive and incredibly strong. Tae-sung knelt beside one of the claw marks, running his hand along its edge. The rock had been torn like paper. No creature should be that powerful. He found more evidence as he explored. The scattered remains of alien ships half buried in volcanic soil. Their hulls were torn apart, metal twisted like foil. Some of the wreckage was centuries old, weathered by time and elements. But other pieces looked newer, their surfaces still showing the burn marks from atmospheric entry. The Devourer was real. It had destroyed all these ships, killed all these crews, and now Tae-sung was alone on its hunting ground. On the 5th day, he saw it for the first time. Tae-sung was collecting water from a small stream that ran with surprisingly clear liquid when the ground began to shake. It wasn't an earthquake. The tremors were rhythmic like footsteps, massive footsteps. He looked up and saw it emerge from behind a volcanic ridge. The Devourer was enormous, easily 50 meters tall at the shoulder. Its body was covered in thick armored plating that glowed with bioluminescent patterns, shifting from deep red to orange. It moved on 6 powerful legs, each ending in claws that could tear through starship hulls. Its head was massive, dominated by multiple eyes that glowed like molten gold and mandibles that looked strong enough to crush buildings. But what struck Tae-sung most was the intelligence in those eyes. This wasn't a mindless beast. The Devourer was studying the landscape, hunting with purpose and calculation. Its head swiveled back and forth, and Tae-sung realized with horror that it was tracking something. It was tracking him. Tae-sung pressed himself against the rock, hardly daring to breathe. His heart hammered in his chest. Every instinct screamed at him to run, but he knew that would be suicide. The Devourer could cross the distance between them in seconds with those massive legs. The creature's head turned toward his hiding spot. Its multiple eyes focused on the exact rock where Tae-sung crouched. For a long moment, they stared at each other across the volcanic plain. Tae-sung saw his death reflected in those golden eyes. Then the Devourer roared. The sound was deafening, a mixture of frequencies that Tae-sung felt in his bones. The ground shook. Loose rocks tumbled down from the cliffs. The creature began moving toward him, each step bringing it closer with terrifying speed. Tae-sung ran. He sprinted back toward the cave system, his backpack bouncing wildly. Behind him, the Devourer's footsteps shook the earth. He could hear its breathing, feel the heat radiating from its massive body. He would never make it to the cave in time. The creature was too fast, too large. Tae-sung's mind raced, searching for options. Then he saw it. A volcanic vent, steam rising from cracks in the ground. It was a risk, but it was his only chance. He changed direction, running straight toward the vent. The Devourer followed, its roar shaking the air. Tae-sung could feel its hot breath on his back now. He was out of time. At the last second, he dove to the side. The Devourer lunged forward, unable to stop its momentum. Tae-sung grabbed a metal panel from his pack and jammed it into the cracks around the volcanic vent, then struck it hard with a rock. The vent erupted. Superheated steam and gas exploded upward, directly into the Devourer's face. The creature recoiled, roaring in pain and confusion. The bioluminescent patterns on its armor flared bright red. Taesung didn't wait to see more. He ran for the cave system, his legs burning with effort. He squeezed through the narrow entrance and kept going, deeper into the tunnels. Behind him, he could hear the devourer outside, its roars echoing through the mountain. He ran until his legs gave out, collapsing in one of the deeper chambers where the blue crystals cast their eerie glow. His entire body shook with adrenaline and exhaustion. He had survived, but just barely. The devourer knew he was here now. It knew where he hid. The volcanic vent trick would not work again. Taesung realized with grim certainty that he could not keep running. This planet was the devourer's territory, and eventually it would corner him. He needed a different strategy. Running would only delay the inevitable. Fighting was impossible against something that size and strength. As his breathing slowed and his heartbeat returned to normal, Taesung began to think. He was an engineer, trained to solve problems. He was also a soldier, trained to assess threats and find weaknesses. The devourer was intelligent. It hunted with strategy. That meant it could potentially be reasoned with, or at least understood. If he was going to survive, he needed to learn about this creature. He needed to understand why it killed everything that came to this planet. It was an insane idea, but it was the only idea he had. Taesung pulled out his small supply of food and water, rationing it carefully. He would need his strength for what came next. He was not going to run anymore. He was going to study the devourer. For 3 days, Taesung watched the devourer from hidden positions among the rocks. He moved carefully, always staying downwind, always keeping cover between himself and the massive creature. He learned its patterns, studied its behavior, and began to see things he had missed during their first terrifying encounter. The devourer followed specific routes across the volcanic plains. It visited certain locations at regular intervals as if patrolling territory. It avoided some areas completely, particularly regions where the lava flows were most active. Most importantly, it seemed to be searching for something, not just randomly hunting. Taesung also noticed something else. The creature was injured. One of its 6 legs dragged slightly when it walked. Across its armored carapace, a massive scar leaked luminescent fluid that glowed in the darkness. The bioluminescent patterns that covered its body flickered irregularly near the wound, sometimes flashing with what looked like pain. The devourer was not just a mindless killing machine. It was a creature in agony. On the 4th day of observation, Taesung made a discovery that changed everything. While tracking the devourer's patrol route, he stumbled into a cave system he had not explored before. Unlike the simple volcanic caves where he sheltered, this one showed signs of construction. The walls were too smooth, too regular. Metal supports held up the ceiling, though they were ancient and corroded. As Taesung went deeper, his small flashlight revealed something incredible, an alien outpost, partially collapsed but still intact enough to explore. The technology was unlike anything he had seen before. Not the sleek advanced equipment of the Galactic Council, but something older, more organic in design. The walls were covered in symbols he could not read, but some of the equipment still showed faint power readings. In what looked like a research station, Taesung found data storage units. Most were dead, destroyed by time and the harsh environment. But one unit flickered to life when he carefully connected it to a power cell salvaged from his pod. The screen glowed with alien text that slowly transformed into something readable as the ancient translation program activated. Taesung read the logs with growing understanding and horror. The outpost had belonged to a research expedition from a civilization that existed centuries before the current Galactic Council. They had come to Karos 9 to study the planet's unique geological properties, but they had found something else: the Devourer. According to the logs, the Devourer was not a natural creature. It had been bioengineered by an even older civilization, one that had fought a war against an enemy the logs called the Swarm. The Devourer was designed as a guardian, a living weapon programmed to protect something buried deep within Karos 9. The researchers had tried to study the creature, but their presence had triggered its defensive protocols. The Devourer had attacked their ships, forcing them to abandon the outpost. The final log entry was written by a researcher named in symbols that translated roughly to Keeper of Records. We understand now why the Guardian attacks all who come here. It protects what lies beneath, as it was programmed to do millennia ago. But the Guardian is damaged. We detected a foreign object embedded in its central processor node. The object appears to be debris from one of the ships it destroyed, now lodged in its biological systems. The Guardian is in constant pain, which makes it more aggressive. We attempted to help, but it would not let us approach. We must leave before we are all killed. May future visitors have better luck than we did. Taesung sat back, his mind racing. The Devourer was not attacking out of malice or hunger. It was following its programming, protecting its territory, all while suffering from a wound that had never healed. The debris lodged in its body was slowly killing it, and the pain made it lash out at anything that came near. An insane idea formed in his mind. It was dangerous, possibly suicidal, but it was also his only real chance of survival. If he could somehow help the Devourer, remove the object causing it pain, maybe the creature would not see him as a threat. Maybe it would let him live. The question was how to get close enough to try. Over the next 2 weeks, Taesung implemented a plan that would have seemed impossible a month ago. Using equipment from the ancient outpost, he created a series of offerings for the Devourer. The blue crystals from the caves could be cultivated, and the logs indicated they were a nutrient source for the Guardian. He grew small batches and left them along the Devourer's patrol route. At first, the creature ignored the offerings, but gradually it began to investigate them. Taesung watched from hiding as the massive beast approached the crystals, sniffed them with sensory organs near its mandibles, and eventually consumed them. The bioluminescent patterns on its armor brightened slightly after feeding, suggesting the crystals provided some relief or nutrition. Next, Taesung began creating vibrations. The research logs had mentioned that the Devourer communicated through low-frequency sound waves. He used metal panels to strike patterns against the rock, simple rhythms that he repeated consistently. At first, the Devourer responded with aggressive roars and charges toward the sound source. But Taesung persisted, always leaving more crystal offerings nearby. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, the Devourer's responses changed. It stopped charging immediately. It began to investigate the vibration sources more carefully. Once, after Taesung left an especially large offering, the Devourer created its own vibration pattern, a deep rumbling that shook the ground. It was trying to communicate back. On the 19th day since his banishment, Taesung decided it was time. He prepared himself carefully, gathering the medical equipment he had salvaged and repaired from the ancient outpost. He had cutting tools, scanners, and synthesized pain suppressants that the research station's still-functioning laboratory had produced. He walked out onto the volcanic plain during what passed for morning on Karos 9, when the temperature was least extreme. He carried no weapons, only his medical supplies and a large container of cultivated crystals. He found a clear area and began creating the vibration pattern he had been using, the one the Devourer had started to recognize. Then he waited. The ground began to shake with familiar rhythmic tremors. The Devourer appeared from behind a ridge, its massive form silhouetted against the red sky. It moved toward him slowly, more cautiously than before. The bioluminescent patterns on its armor flickered between red and orange, showing uncertainty rather than pure aggression. Taesung's heart hammered in his chest, but he forced himself to remain still. He continued the vibration pattern, steady and consistent. When the Devourer was close enough that its shadow fell over him, he slowly knelt and placed the container of crystals on the ground. Then he backed away, hands visible and empty. The Devourer approached the offering. Its multiple eyes focused on Taesung, studying him with that unsettling intelligence. It consumed the crystals, then created a low vibration that Taesung felt through his entire body. Not aggressive, curious. Taesung slowly pointed to the scar on the Devourer's carapace, the wound that leaked luminescent fluid. He made a gesture toward his medical supplies, trying to communicate his intention. The Devourer watched but did not attack. For several minutes they remained like that, human and Guardian studying each other across the gulf of their differences. Then, almost hesitantly, the Devourer lowered its massive body closer to the ground. The wound on its carapace was now at a level where Taesung could reach it if he dared. It was giving him permission to try. Taesung picked up his medical scanner with shaking hands and took a step forward. The Devourer remained still, He took another step, then another, until he stood beside the massive creature. Up close it was even more terrifying. Each armored plate was the size of a car. The heat radiating from its body was intense, but the wound was there, and inside it, embedded deep in the biological tissue, he could see the foreign object on his scanner. A shard of alien metal, lodged in what the research logs had called the central processor node. It had been there so long that tissue had grown around it. But the object was incompatible with the Devourer's biology, causing constant pain and slowly poisoning the Guardian. Tae-sung looked up at the Devourer's eyes. "I am going to help you," he said quietly, knowing the creature could not understand his words but hoping his tone would communicate his intent. "This is going to hurt." The Devourer's bioluminescent patterns flickered blue for the first time. Then it remained perfectly still, waiting. Tae-sung began to work. The surgery took 6 hours. 6 hours of the most intense focus Tae-sung had ever experienced in his life. One wrong move, one moment of hesitation, and the Devourer might instinctively lash out and kill him. But he could not think about that. He could only focus on the task in front of him. First, he administered the pain suppressants. The ancient outpost laboratory had produced a compound that the research logs claimed would work on the Guardian's biology. Tae-sung injected it carefully around the wound site, using syringes he had improvised from outpost equipment. The Devourer flinched at each injection, its bioluminescent patterns flashing red, but it remained still. Once the suppressants took effect, Tae-sung began using the cutting torch. The tissue around the embedded shard had calcified over centuries, forming a hard shell that needed to be carefully removed. He worked slowly, precisely, constantly checking his scanner to make sure he was not damaging vital systems. The Devourer's breathing grew heavier as he worked. Its body trembled with pain despite the suppressants. Several times it released low-frequency vibrations that Tae-sung felt in his bones, sounds that spoke of agony, but it did not attack him. It trusted him to continue. Sweat poured down Tae-sung's face. The heat from the Devourer's body was intense this close. His hands cramped from the delicate work, but he kept going, layer by layer, cutting away the calcified tissue until he could see the shard clearly. It was a piece of advanced alloy, probably from one of the destroyed ships. It had penetrated deep into the Devourer's central processor node, the biological computer that controlled many of its functions. The shard was sending out electromagnetic interference that caused constant pain and disrupted the Guardian systems. Removing it was going to be the most dangerous part. One slip could cause massive damage to the processor node. The Devourer might die, or worse, it might go into a rage that nothing could stop. Tae-sung took a deep breath and steadied his hands. He used the finest tools he had, working with the precision of a neurosurgeon. Millimeter by millimeter, he worked the shard loose from the surrounding tissue. The Devourer's entire body went rigid. Its bioluminescent patterns flickered wildly, flashing through red, orange, yellow, and colors Tae-sung had no names for. Then finally, the shard came free. Tae-sung pulled it out carefully and held it up. It was about the size of his fist, irregular and sharp. This small piece of metal had caused centuries of pain for the Guardian. He tossed it aside and immediately began treating the wound site with the medical supplies he had prepared. The moment he sealed the wound, the Devourer released a sound unlike anything Tae-sung had heard before. It was a deep, resonant call that shook the entire valley. The volcanic plains seemed to vibrate in response. Birds that Tae-sung had not even known existed on this world took flight from hidden crevices. The sound went on for nearly a minute, echoing off the mountains. When it finally stopped, the Devourer's bioluminescent patterns had changed completely. The aggressive reds and oranges were gone, replaced by calm blues and soft greens. The patterns flowed smoothly across its armor, no longer flickering with pain. The Guardian turned its massive head toward Tae-sung, and its multiple eyes focused on him with an intensity that was different from before. It was not looking at prey. It was looking at someone who had helped it. The Devourer slowly lifted one of its massive legs and placed it gently on the ground next to Tae-sung, close enough to touch but not threatening. It was a gesture, Tae-sung realized. An acknowledgement, perhaps even gratitude. Tae-sung reached out and placed his hand on the armored leg. The surface was warm and surprisingly smooth. The bioluminescent patterns near his hand brightened slightly, pulsing gently. Through the contact he felt a vibration, complex and rhythmic. The Devourer was communicating with him. Over the next several days, a remarkable thing happened. The Devourer did not leave. It stayed near Taesung's cave, resting and healing. Sometimes it would create vibration patterns and Taesung would respond with his own, using the metal panels. They could not have complex conversations, but they developed a basic understanding. The Devourer showed him things. It led him to areas of the planet where water was cleanest, where the edible crystals grew most abundantly. It showed him safe paths through the lava fields and warned him away from areas where the volcanic activity was most dangerous. It was teaching him how to survive on Karos 9. Taesung, in turn, continued to help the Guardian. He cleaned the healing wound site regularly, checked for signs of infection, and made sure the Devourer was recovering properly. The Guardian's injured leg grew stronger. It began moving with more ease, the limp almost completely gone. One day, about a week after the surgery, the Devourer led Taesung on a long journey across the volcanic plains. They traveled for hours, the Guardian moving slowly enough for the human to keep up. Taesung had no idea where they were going, but he trusted the creature now. They arrived at a canyon he had never seen before. The Devourer descended carefully, using its powerful legs to navigate the steep walls. Taesung followed, his heart racing with curiosity. At the bottom of the canyon was an entrance, a massive doorway carved into the rock itself. The Devourer stopped at the entrance and created a specific vibration pattern. The doorway responded, ancient mechanisms activating after centuries of dormancy. Lights flickered to life inside, revealing a tunnel that led deep underground. This was what the Guardian protected. This was its purpose. Taesung walked into the tunnel, the Devourer following behind him. The tunnel opened into an enormous underground cavern, easily a kilometer across. And in the center of the cavern was a structure that took Taesung's breath away. It was a massive installation, a blend of technology and organic matter that pulsed with energy. Towers of crystalline material rose toward the cavern ceiling, connected by bridges of what looked like living metal. At the heart of the installation, a sphere of pure blue light rotated slowly, generating waves of energy that Taesung could feel even from a distance. His scanner went wild with readings. This was not just a structure. It was a planetary defense system, more advanced than anything the current Galactic Council possessed. The power output alone was staggering. If activated fully, it could generate shields capable of protecting entire star systems from attack. Taesung understood now why the ancient civilization had created the Devourer. This installation was a weapon of last resort, something so powerful and dangerous that it needed a guardian who would never abandon its post, never be corrupted or bribed. The Devourer was not just a monster. It was a soldier, standing watch over something that could change the balance of power in the galaxy. And now Taesung had access to it. He spent the next month exploring the installation, learning its systems. The ancient computers still functioned, their interface eventually adapting to allow him to interact with them. He learned that the installation had been built to defend against an enemy called the Swarm, an alien force that had threatened all life in this part of the galaxy millennia ago. The Swarm was gone now, destroyed or driven away by weapons like this one. But the installation remained, waiting for another threat that might someday emerge. And the Devourer had guarded it faithfully, despite its pain, despite its isolation. Taesung also found something else in the installation's systems, a communication array. It was old, but it could still function. With some work, he might be able to repair his broken communicator using parts from the array. He could send a signal that would reach Galactic Council space. The question was, did he want to? The aliens had condemned him to death. They had refused to believe his innocence, had sent him to this world expecting him to die. They feared the Devourer, feared this planet. But Taesung had conquered both, not through violence, but through understanding and compassion. He thought about it for several days while he worked on the communicator. The Devourer watched him curiously, sometimes helping by moving heavy equipment with its powerful legs. They had become partners, human and guardian, working together. Finally, Taesung made his decision. He would send the signal, not because he wanted to be rescued, but because he wanted the aliens to know he had survived. He wanted them to know that their death sentence had failed, and he wanted them to understand that the human they had dismissed as primitive had achieved something they never could. He had befriended the monster they feared. Taesung repaired the communicator and activated the communication array. The signal would take time to reach council space, but it would get there eventually. And when it did, the aliens would have to acknowledge that Taesung was still alive. Standing in the heart of the ancient installation, with the Devourer resting peacefully nearby, Taesung allowed himself a small smile. The aliens thought they had sent him to certain death. Instead, they had given him access to the most powerful weapon in known space. Let them come. He would be ready. 3 months after his banishment, the signal from Karos 9 finally reached the outer monitoring stations of the Galactic Council. At first, the technicians thought it was a malfunction. Nothing could transmit from that death world. The Devourer destroyed all technology that landed there, but the signal persisted. It carried identification codes that matched the emergency pod they had used to banish the human, called Taesung. The technicians reported this impossible data to their superiors, and the news eventually reached the council itself. Vikralis listened to the report with his mandibles clicking in agitation. This must be an error. The human cannot still be alive. Nothing survives on Karos 9. Aurea pulsed with uncertain colors. The signal is real. Our best analysis confirms it originates from the planet's surface. We must send a verification team. The council debated for hours. Some wanted to ignore the signal entirely. Others worried that it might be a trap, perhaps set by the Devourer itself. Finally, they agreed to send a small ship with a verification team. If the human had somehow survived, they would confirm his death and ensure no evidence remained of their banishment order. If it was a false signal, they would destroy whatever was creating it. Vikralis insisted on leading the team himself. He wanted to see the human's corpse with his own eyes. The ship that departed for Karos 9 was small but heavily armed. Besides Vikralis, it carried a security team of 6 elite soldiers from various council species, and a science officer named Hyunwoo, one of the few humans who had achieved a position of respect within the council. Hyunwoo had requested to join the mission when he heard about the signal. If Taesung had somehow survived, Hyunwoo wanted to be there. The journey to Karos 9 took 6 days. As they approached the planet, sensors confirmed that the signal was real and active. It came from the surface, transmitting continuously on emergency frequencies. But there was something else. The ship's advanced scanners detected massive energy readings from beneath the planet's surface, readings that matched no known natural phenomenon. "What is that?" the pilot asked, staring at the display. The science officer checked the readings 3 times before answering. "Unknown. The energy signature is unlike anything in our databases. It appears to be artificial, but the technology is far more advanced than anything we possess." Vikralis felt a chill run through his body. What had the human found on that planet? They entered orbit carefully, ready to flee at the first sign of the Devourer. But the massive creature did not appear. The volcanic plains looked as hostile as ever, but there was no sign of the Guardian that had destroyed so many ships before them. "Prepare a landing shuttle," Vikralis ordered. "We will investigate the signal source. Remain ready to extract us immediately if the Devourer appears." The shuttle descended through Karos 9's toxic atmosphere. The pilot navigated carefully, avoiding the worst of the volcanic activity. As they approached the coordinates of the signal, Hyunwoo pointed at the viewport. "There, do you see that?" On the surface, in a relatively clear area of volcanic plain, a figure stood waiting. A human figure wearing a modified environmental suit and standing perfectly still. Beside him, resting on the ground like a mountain, was the Devourer. The pilot nearly crashed the shuttle in shock. Several of the security team raised their weapons instinctively, but Vikralis stared at the impossible scene with growing dread. The human was alive, and the Devourer was not attacking him. The shuttle landed roughly, throwing everyone forward. Vikralis recovered first and activated the external speakers. "Human Taesung, you were sentenced to death on this world. How are you still alive?" Through the viewport, they watched Taesung place his hand on the Devourer's armored leg. The massive creature's bioluminescent pattern shifted to calm blues and greens. Taesung activated his own communicator, his voice coming through clearly. "I survived because I learned to adapt. I survived because I understood what you never tried to understand. This creature is not a mindless monster. It is a guardian, and now it is my ally." Hyunwoo leaned forward, speaking urgently. "Taesung, this is Hyunwoo. How did you do this? How did you survive the Devourer?" "By helping it instead of fighting it," Taesung replied. "It was in pain. I healed it. Now it trusts me." Vikralis felt his certainty crumbling. This was not supposed to be possible. The human should have died within days. Instead, he had achieved something no council species had ever accomplished. He had made contact with the most dangerous creature in known space. "We will take you into custody," Vikralis announced. "You will return to the station to complete your sentence." "No," Taesung said calmly. "You will listen to what I have to say or you will face the consequences. You dare threaten the council?" Vikralis's voice rose with anger. "We can destroy you from orbit. Your pet creature cannot reach us here." "I am not threatening you with the Devourer," Taesung said. "I am threatening you with this." He raised a small control device. On the shuttle's sensors, the massive energy readings from beneath the surface suddenly spiked. Around the ship, the air began to shimmer. The pilot frantically checked his instruments. "Sir, we have a problem. Our weapon systems are offline. Navigation is unresponsive. We cannot take off." Vikralis felt true fear for the first time in decades.
"What have you done?"
Taesung's voice remained calm.
"I have activated a planetary defense system built by a civilization that existed long before your council."
"The Devourer was created to guard this installation. Now I control it. Your ship is trapped in a localized field that will prevent any hostile action. You cannot attack me and you cannot leave until I allow it." The security team pointed their weapons at the viewport, but the pilot shook his head. "Personal weapons will not penetrate the shuttle hull. And even if they could, we need him to release the field." Vikralis's mandibles clicked rapidly, a sign of extreme stress. "What do you want?" "First, I want you to access this data file." Taesung transmitted information that appeared on the shuttle's displays. Hyunwoo quickly reviewed it, his eyes widening. "This is security footage from the Meridian Power Relay. The original footage, not the edited version presented at the trial. The footage showed everything. It showed Velkath, a prominent engineer from one of the council species, planting Taesung's genetic material at the sabotage site. It showed him manipulating the security systems to create false evidence. It showed him stealing Taesung's access codes and using them to commit the sabotage that killed 47 people. "Velkath framed me," Taesung said. "He wanted credit for a new energy technology that I had actually developed. When I discovered his theft, he created the sabotage to eliminate me. You were so eager to believe the worst about humans that you never investigated properly. You sentenced an innocent person to death." Hyunwoo looked at Vikralis. "This evidence is conclusive. The trial was a mistake." Vikralis said nothing. His crystalline eyes reflected the data on the screens, but he could not deny what they showed. "I could destroy your ship right now," Taesung continued. "The weapon system I control is more powerful than anything your council possesses. I could activate it fully and threaten every council world. But I will not do that. I do not want revenge. I want justice." "What are your terms?" Vikralis asked quietly. "3 demands, Taesung said. "First, humanity will be granted full membership in the Galactic Council with all rights and privileges. No more treating us as primitives or second-class species. Second, Karos 9 will be declared a protected world. The Devourer will be left in peace and this planet will remain undisturbed. Third, Velkath will be arrested and tried for his crimes." Oria's voice came through from the orbiting ship. "These demands are significant. The Council must vote on them." "Then vote," Taesung said. "But know this. I have been here for 3 months. In that time, I have learned to operate systems that your best scientists cannot understand. I have befriended a creature that destroyed 17 of your ships. I did this alone with minimal supplies because I refused to die. If this is what one human can do when left for dead, imagine what humanity could achieve as your partners instead of your servants." There was a long silence. Finally, Vikralis spoke. "The human speaks truth. He has demonstrated capabilities we did not believe possible. I recommend the council accept his terms." One by one, the council members agreed. The vote was not unanimous, but it was clear enough. Humanity would join the council. Karos 9 would be protected. Velkath would face justice. Taesung deactivated the defense field. The shuttle systems came back online immediately. He walked forward, the Devourer rising to follow him. Even through the shuttle's hull, the team could feel the ground shake with each of the Guardian steps. "You may leave now," Taesung said. "I will remain here for another week to ensure the defense system is properly secured. Then I will return to represent humanity on the council." Vikralis watched as the human turned and walked away, the massive Devourer following him like a loyal companion. It was the most humbling moment of his long life. The council had tried to eliminate a problem by sending it to die on a death world. Instead, they had created their newest council member and given him access to a weapon that could threaten them all. But Taesung had not used that weapon for revenge. He had used it for justice.